Good day, everyone. My name is Enki with Ramviki Tefo. And my god, what a really good day it is. You know, I meant to come out with this video before the video on Tia, but as you can no doubt tell from the duration of this video, this took me quite some time to put together. Today is all about something we received that was so incredible that we just couldn't wait to put it into an episode. Since it's certainly not a secret, I'll just come right out with it. Rammstein's 9-track demo tape. It has been found and recovered, and yes, I have heard it. We haven't given much detail yet, other than, yes, it has been recovered, but that ends now. I feel like the luckiest fan on Earth to actually get to be the one to reveal to you, for the first time, the secrets of this tape that have been beyond our reach for years. But let's pace ourselves, shall we? I wouldn't want to just come out of the gate screeching like a lunatic and give everyone a heart attack. What you need first is an introduction into what the hell we're even discussing here. And might I add the little disclaimer that this discussion assumes a certain level of prior knowledge about Rammstein's demo tapes, so little time will be spent explaining them for the uninitiated, though I do plan to do that in the future. Today is all about understanding the 9-track tape. You will all, surely, be familiar with Rammstein's demo tapes. The main ones, that is. The most well-known and popular one is the 6-track Motor Music tape that has the iconic Herzeleid demos on it. Der Riecher, Weißes Fleisch, and the infamous fade-out version of Schwarzes Glas. And if you've ever listened to the full version, on behalf of a good friend, you are welcome. But, come to find out, this 6-track is actually at least the band's 3rd tape of that length. Before that came an earlier 6-track tape with the aforementioned full version of Schwarzes Glas, several 3-track tapes, multiple variants of a 5-track tape, one of which has a mysterious 6th track. Confusing, huh? And the whole 5-track tape situation is a legend unto itself, but my point is, Rammstein demo tapes are a diverse bunch. But most of us are familiar with the numbers. 6-track, 5-track, 3-track, and 4-track too, even. But a 9-track tape? That's news to a lot of people. Tell me more about that. Well, I'd be happy to. Me? The 9-track tape, which we've also taken to calling the Rough Mixes tape, was the latest known Motor Music tape to be sent around during the pre-release promotion cycle of the band's first album, Herzeleid. We got our first look at an example of such a tape in 2011, in an article for German music magazine Breakout. Since then, literally up until last month, all we could say about the contents of this tape was based on the text visible on the J-card, that's the little paper insert. 6 rough mixes and 3 mixes, it read. But which were which? It didn't say. The track list showed Laichzeit, Feuerräder, Asche, Herzeleid, Seemann, Fleisch, Heirate mich, Hallo Hallo, and Rammstein. This tape marks the earliest appearance of any studio version of Laichzeit, Asche zu Asche, Herzeleid, and Heirate mich, and overall the earliest known appearance of any version at all of Asche zu Asche, as it was seemingly absent from all the 1994 concerts. The amount of questions this tape raised is astounding, but despite this, it flew pretty far under most people's radars until recently. This is in part due to scammers and con artists creating fake copies of the tape to sell on eBay, following that Breakout magazine article years ago. Though that article shows a genuine tape, most people's first experience hearing of the tape had to do with those fakes. And there was also a fake 8-track tape going around, so skepticism was running high. But to the 9-track. The highlight here, no doubt, is the presence of Feuerräder on the track list. What version could this be? Taking the stated information of the J-card, it must either be a proper mix of Feuerräder or a rough mix. And the existing live-in-studio demo of Feuerräder certainly didn't meet either of those definitions, and especially not by Rammstein standards. Therefore, this must be a new version, correct? But this just leaves us with another question. If this is a different, more complete version, then why did Rammstein opt to release the very rough live demo instead of this mix and/or rough mix? I wrestled with that question for a while. And that's just for Feuerrede. What about the other 8 songs? What are they like? Is there really a demo of Asche? In general, the first 6 songs on the track list tend to sound more like pre-production demos than they do rough mixes. But they are rough mixes, just, my god, are they rough. And the remaining 3, which are supposed to be the normal mixes, are far from the final mixes on the album. They sound like proper rough mixes. Not a single song on this tape is the same as you know it. Everything has differences. Alright. The teasing stops here. The curtain has been lifted. Let's go one by one. Starting with Laichzeit. Immediately, I can tell that this is going to be interesting. The synth intro is not the same as the album version. It's the same notes, I suppose, but with a very different sounding preset and interesting effects. However you imagine a demo version of Laichzeit to sound, this pretty much sounds like it. But the intro's length differs little from the final mix. It doesn't have the extremely long build-up that the Schlettwein version does. Actually, the album version's intro synth sounds layered, and I think that this early version of Laichzeit's intro might have made it into one of those layers. I think I hear a little bit of it in the back there somewhere, but I couldn't say for certain. This version's structure, overall, is not very different to the release, nothing major shifted around, but with the different instrumental takes used here, I'd flat out call this a demo, if not for one thing. The vocals are almost entirely the same as the album. Same takes, anyway, but the mixing is way off. There's a whole host of backing vocals that are just new to me, and Till is way clearer and less processed most of the time. The vocals for the rest of the tape are, in large part, like this as well. Pretty friggin' weird. Not at all processed or layered the same as the album, and with what I would swear to you are new backing vocals by Till. But yes, largely the final vocal takes. But back to Laichzeit. It is strikingly different so far. The bass is mixed very loud here. It's actually distracting. The first verse has some extra guitar playing in the first half. I like how they fit it in. I wish they had kept up with it as the song progressed. Up to the chorus, this sounds like a Laichzeit demo instrumental with unmastered final vocal takes. After the chorus comes that heavy guitar breakdown, which on the album just is what it is, but on this rough mix, there's a new synth part playing alongside the guitars. Totally absent from the album. However, at the corresponding section of the Schlettwein version of Laichzeit, it does appear to be there. It's hard to make out its full character through the audio quality, but you can tell it's there. And it's a nice touch to this rough mix to get to hear that synth track in its studio form. Coming to the third verse, liebt den Hund, etc. This is the one part that has completely different vocal takes. They did not use this recording of the verse on the album. It's a new take up until Küsst, and the way he says it just has so much emotion. There's quite a pause between Zunge and Küsst, and the way he puts the line across, he just sounds so disgusted. It's fantastic. So then we have another chorus, and another breakdown with that cut synth part. Then comes the brief, slow choral section, before the Die Mutter hat das Meer geheult section. Of note here is that the guitars start playing again early, about when Schneider starts playing his kick drum again towards the end of the slow part. On the album version, the guitars join back in at the same time Till does, but that is not the case here. The very final seconds of the song resemble the album version, so not as abrupt as the live demos, but also none of that decreasing BPM nonsense from the later performances. I cannot stress enough how far off this sounds from the album version. It is so damn interesting. I almost expected to be disappointed by this tape. I thought we'd find a couple cool things, but that most of the songs would not have value. But being a pessimist is easy, and boy was I wrong. So, remember how I just mentioned that the tape only uses final vocal takes? Well, that brings forth the obvious question. What the absolute fuck does that mean for Feuerrede, which isn't even on the album? Nothing. Feuerrede is just the same demo version we know. Moving on to Asche. Okay, I'm just screwing with you. It means exactly what you think it means. New version of Feuerrede! An honest-to-God, non-demo, Herzeleid studio session recording of Feuerrede. Jesus Christ. This is the stuff of legends. Goddamn, I actually, sitting here, cannot believe that this exists. Even though that seems obvious now, but let's get to it. The intro is essentially the 1996 live version. It doesn't sound much like the 1994 studio demo at all. Actually, the intro sounds pretty much exactly like the Freiwilde live version as well, now that I think about it. Although it isn't exactly like those live versions I mentioned. This rough mix has 2 different presets of the synth intro playing through either stereo channel. When the main riff starts, I was a little surprised to hear that it had been changed a little. It's slowed down a bit, and the palm mutes are played with more time in between them. It's very noticeable, and it really emphasizes the non-muted notes. You know, this whole version, in general, is structured almost exactly like the live Freiwilde version, minus some weirdness. I'll explain when we get there. Anyway, the first verse. No lyrical changes here, really, except that the yas at the end of the verses carried over from the live performances. But, my god, these almost finished Feuerrede vocals are just absolute gold. Orgasmus with every second. Till positively nailed it here. The next thing of note is the chorus. It comes directly after the end of Till's verses, instead of the instrumental pre-chorus with the melodic guitar playing without Till's vocals. Till starts singing immediately. Again, you can experience this with Freiwilde. I definitely sense the corrupting influence of Hellner here. Sorry, Hellner, if you're listening, I quite like you actually. Now to the chorus itself. I half expected there to be some new lyrics with the words Blutige Risse in there somewhere. I mean, that's listed as an alt title of the song, and those usually have something to do with the words, but no, same words as always. I guess it's another thing or something. But how does the music actually sound? Really good. Holy crap, this version of the chorus has so much goddamn power. The guitars are way heavier, Till's vocals are mixed and layered impeccably, he sings the lyrics much lower, he puts heavy stress on the syllables that sync up with the most emphasized guitar chords, and complementing all of this, there's a synth playing that, I don't know, kind of sounds like warbling? Like, if you've ever taken a thin but solid sheet of hard plastic and just jiggled it around a little bit, that sort of sound. I love it here so much. This chorus is an absolute marvel and treasure. After Till wraps up, the chorus continues on instrumentally before going into that next fast guitar section, which precedes the repetition of the main riff. During this part of the live recordings, Till fills the empty space by repeating the word Feuerrede, but not on the 9-track tape. This version fills the space with entirely new lyrics. Till says Feuer, komm tu mir weh, Feuer, der Schmerz ist schön. Not at all what I had expected, but new unheard lyrics are always a win. And again, I feel like this was added at Hellner's behest, like the Heirate mich chorus. The key difference being that chorus is good, whereas these extra lines in Feuerrede sound super out of place. But damn if it isn't fascinating. This brings us back to the main riff and the second verse. Another fantastic vocal performance by Till, and that stupidly good chorus comes back, twice in a row this time. The end of the third chorus goes straight into the guitar solo, a little abruptly, if you ask me, but the strangest thing is that Till sings the newly added lyrics over the whole solo. And by that I mean the exact same take from the last time was just copy-pasted over it, poorly synced. And the two volumes seriously conflict. It's actually pretty comical. Who puts vocals over a guitar solo? But I don't even think that's the weirdest part. That would be what comes immediately after the solo. In the other versions, this is the part where most of the music stops and the synth continues on by itself. And when Till and Flake would do their old stage gag of Flake riding on his back and beating him with some blunt object like a neon lamp or a piece of wood or something. But in this studio version, it's basically just drums and nothing else. The bass plays for like almost literally half a second at the start, and briefly plays the main bass line towards the end of the section, but this is no bass solo. The majority of it is just basic drums and empty space. It feels like a part of the song that's still under construction, and nothing but scaffolding. Like they were gonna come back to it and put something there, but had not yet done so. It really feels like glitching out of bounds in a video game. But eventually, Till comes back in with his repetition of the "Tu mir langsam weh" verse, leading into two final choruses, which I cannot stress enough, totally make up for all the prior weirdness. Now, this version, unlike the demo, has a 15-second outro, which is made up of the choir samples Flake plays throughout the song, and some light guitar jamming from Paul playing a couple chords, and Rechat playing a variant of the melodic guitar from the choruses, which eventually fades out. But this is no Schwarzes Glas fade out. There is definitely no section of the song that was left off here. My lord, this was a trip. I will probably never get over the fact that this exists. I'm going to move on for now, but I'll circle back to some of the more obvious questions about it later on in the video. But for now, let's look at the second most interesting thing on the tape. Asche. Asche zu Asche definitely sounds the most like a demo track out of any of the other songs. Again, really the only thing keeping us from straight up saying this is a demo is the fact that the band themselves labeled this a rough mix. And yes, it uses mostly the final vocal takes, with the same aforementioned volume and processing differences, and backing vocal weirdness that gives the vocals a sound that is distinctly different from the final mix, even though they use the same source recording. When the song starts, the first thing you notice is it starts with a synth intro. Completely new to me, and absolutely fascinating. I don't fault them for removing it though, as there were already plenty of songs that started with synth intros on the album, which could have felt a bit repetitive. After the synth intro, the song proceeds as normal, with the main riff starting and with the drums joining in after a bit and just jamming together until the verse riff starts. But damn does it sound different, tonally and everything. Playing the same riff, of course, but yeah, it does have the tone of a demo recording. While the synth intro is playing, you can even clearly hear their fingers moving into position on the guitar strings. Okay, on to that first verse. We don't see any lyrical changes, but what's interesting is that there's this screechy sounding guitar thing throughout the verses that's playing a long note melody. On the final mix, there is a synth effect that plays a similar melody in place of this. The screeching guitar thing I'm talking about can still be found on the final mix, however. You can hear it during that, I don't know if you'd call it a bass solo or not, but you know which part I'm talking about. It starts at 2:18 on the album version. The scratchy guitar sound you hear there plays during the verses on the rough mix. Pretty prominent in the mix too. I find it sad that this was cut out of the final mix, except for that one little remnant of it. Well, it might have been layered in with the final version's choruses too, but it's hard to hear exactly if that's the guitar sound or the synth replacement. The next big thing I noticed is that the Staub backing vocals come in much earlier, starting during the second verse. If I recall correctly, They aren't present on the final mix until during the choruses after the bass section. Now, to the actual first chorus on the rough mix, the biggest change here is in the synth that begins to play right after Till stops singing. It sounds very, very different to the album version. It's the same notes, but the preset and effects, it's significantly more, I think Rasputin called it wet. And that's honestly the best way to describe it. It immediately stands out, and it really contributes to the overall demo feel of this version. And, while that's playing, we get another early appearance of the backing vocals. This time, it's Ich komm wieder. Once at 2 minutes in, and again at 2:11. On the final version, you only hear this twice at the end of the song, and it's heavily reverbed and mixed very quietly. But here, it's clean, and as loud as the rest of the vocals. And throughout the song, it plays a total of 10 times. That's a pretty significant decrease from this to the final mix. Now, we're up to that bass part I already talked about. There's a third Ich komm wieder at 2:23, right before Till starts singing again. And to Till, either there's new vocal takes layered over Till's main take, or they're just synced up better in the later mix. Getting up to the next chorus, the Zu Staub vocals start back up again in their normal place, and from 3/6 onward, the Ich komm widas come back in and repeat straight through to the end of the song. The extremely wet synth makes a comeback as well. After this, the song has a completely different ending. It goes back into its synth intro, and as that goes on, the guitars jump in for a Ramlied-style ending, with some final heavy chords for emphasis. Then there's a few moments of silence, then a final Ich komm wieder plays by itself, with some ominous digital stuttering-like effect added. The best way to describe it is really like a robot or a cyborg dying and moaning out their last words. The first thing on my brain upon hearing this outro was just utter confusion. Next up is Herzeleid, and we're back at it with another synth intro that was cut from the final version. I'm sensing a pattern. It's the same as the live intro they've used since forever, I guess, only a lot shorter. I always wished that I could have a studio version with that intro. This takes us straight into the verses, where the familiar lyrics are heard. I feel the need to stress again how thoroughly different the mixing is in every aspect to the album versions. Guitar and synth tone, bass and vocal processing, drum levels. If you compare the album version of Herzeleid to this, it's like night and day. Such a different sound. Rough sound aside, the first major difference we encounter is when we get to the word einst. On the final versions, this is pitched up pretty high with a heavily exaggerated echo added. But this is not the case here. It's a new vocal take, it's unprocessed, and it's just Till's normal voice. And then he moves on. Nothing special added. Caught me off guard. And the last word of that line, scheinen, is layered with some heavy-hitting backing vocals on the album, for a nice effect. But on the rough mix, it's just Till's main take played alone. Again, this is the type of thing your ears will immediately flag as standing out, after so many years of hearing it a certain way. Getting into the first chorus, I would swear to you that I hear a child's voice or a woman's voice or something singing Herzeleid along with Till. Something high-pitched is following his vocal melody on some layer of the mix. Perhaps I'm mistaking a synth of some kind for a human voice, or maybe it's just Till on backing vocals, but it's definitely something and it stands out to me. It continues on into the post-chorus Herzeleid screaming as well. Reaching the keyboard solo, I noticed that the very last note is held for longer, going on into the transition back to Till's vocals. On the album mix, they just cut it off as soon as the transition starts, but here they let it ring. After Till's Zweisamkeit line comes the guitar solo as expected, but it hits like a massive wall of noise. Good lord, it's dissonant at first, but you get used to it. It sounds like what's happening here is as soon as the soloing guitar starts, the rhythm guitar starts the main riff, the one from between the verses, underneath it for almost the whole time, before switching to the muted verse riff itself for the final few measures of the solo. On the album version, the second guitar sort of follows the soloing guitar with some chords and the verse riff, but no main riff. Listening closely enough to get that figured out was a little bit unpleasant. The soloing guitar continues jamming a couple of notes into and through the final chorus, up until the end of the song. Speaking of the end, it's a lot more like the live outro than the album one. On the album, all the instruments stop and that screeching synth plays for a few seconds before the guitars jam the final few chords. On this rough mix, the screeching synth holds its note, the soloing guitar holds its note, and the bar or two of outro synth from the live versions plays out before the guitars come back for the final few chords. Basically, what we have here from Herzeleid is a mix of the album and live versions put together with demo mixing. It's bizarre. The whole tape has been bizarre so far. After Herzeleid is Seemann, which breaks the pattern of each of the previous 4 songs by not having a synth intro like it does on the album. That synth sound you're familiar with doesn't appear anywhere in this version. The bass just abruptly starts and does its thing, waiting on Till to start singing. Speaking of Till, these are actually not the album vocals. It's hard to tell in some places, but there are definitely at least large parts of this song that use unheard vocals. I also checked to see if they matched the demo versions. They don't. Same lyrics though, to be clear. The lack of any added vocal effects and reverb is very noticeable as well. The next thing I want to mention is the part where the guitars first come in. On the release version, it kinda sounds like an obnoxious wall of conflicting noise, but here it's toned down and executed far better, making it much more pleasant. Structurally, aside from the missing intro, there's not much different to discuss. In the latter half of the song, the different vocal takes become more and more obvious, as Till stresses and intonates words very differently than what is known. The repeating kalt fade out feels more emotional to me somehow. The last difference I caught onto is that on the album version, Olli adds a quick hammer-on note to the main bass theme right before the end of the song, but that is missing on this version. If that level of detail isn't enough for these kinds of videos, then I don't know what is. The song also doesn't have the proper ending that the album version does. Instead of that, Olli just keeps playing the main bass line as the song fades out. So, Fleisch. Yeah, there's something wrong with this one. The demo of Weißes Fleisch found on the earlier tapes always seemed to me to be much rougher than its fellow demos, and you would think that this supposed rough mix would be an upgrade. But really, it just sounds like they went in reverse, making it even rougher than the demo. I can attribute the lion's share of this to the fact that the pitch and BPM of this version are hideously mangled almost beyond recognition. Which begs the question of if Rammstein intentionally did this themselves, or if this is a genuine mistake caused by a bad transfer from their recording master to the copies of the 9-track tape. It's almost certainly one of these two things, as I am actually able to rule out a bad digitization on our part, or damage caused to the tape by age degradation. As a result of whatever the heck is going on here, the 9-tracks version of Fleisch inherently sounds completely different. But the differences go much deeper than just the speed and pitch. For one thing, the main riff is different. You know how, at the end of the chords and palm mutes, there comes a final single high note? Well, on the album version, this comes at the end of every second measure of the main riff. On this rough mix, it occurs half as frequently, being played at the end of every fourth measure only, with nothing in between. This essentially makes the main riff sound overly extended. I don't know if I explained it well enough, but trust me, it's a very obvious change to the ears. This is also different from how the demo version does it. That version uses yet another differing interval of high notes. If I lost you with all this nonsense talk about measures and pitch, basically, the main riff is a mix of the demo and album versions to whittle it down to a soundbite. The vocals sound at first like they're a completely different recording, but this is, at least mostly, an illusion of the pitch. Though there may still be a line here or there that is sourced from a different vocal take, as in Laichzeit. Underneath the first couple of verses, Till is repeating something in the background. It almost sounds like Tia, but after several re-listens, I'm more confident that it's some sort of creepy, rhythmic, sensual moaning. It changes later on to a sort of heavy breathing. The chorus, which barely lasts 10 seconds because of the speed increase, has some interesting backing vocals going on. It all sounds new to me, but again, it's hard enough to know whether to attribute the backing vocals to new takes or different sync, and that's without the pitch being completely fucked and all the instruments sounding like they're being played by angry geese high on angel dust. Through the next verse and chorus, just continuations of the things I've been talking about, after the guitar solo, the muted riff that was playing during the guitar solo continues all the way through Schneider's drum solo, only stopping when Till's next verse starts. On the album version, it cuts out immediately as soon as the guitar solo ends. Schneider's drumming is also so quiet that I almost thought it wasn't there at all in this part. Through the final chorus of the song, the vocal weirdness and assorted bullshit continues, except that for a few lines at the end, Till's voice almost sounds like it went back to the correct pitch. Not speed, though. This version has the same ending as on the album. So, Weißes Fleisch marks the end of the rough mixes on this tape. The remaining 3 songs are supposed to be the 3 final mixes that the cover sheet was referring to. Whereas the last 6 songs were rough mixes that sound like demos, these next 3 are rough mixes that sound like rough mixes. Well, they're only rough mixes in the sense that they are not the final mixes used for the album, but they're more like alternative and complementary final mixes that were simply rejected in favor of different mixes. They are an incredibly interesting look into how Herzeleid could have sounded. The first of these unused mixes is Heirate mich. Like the rough mix of Asche, this is the earliest known studio version of this song, because no demo versions of Heirate mich ever made it onto any prior demo tapes, at least not the ones we currently know of. Getting straight back into it, there are some extra bells coming in early at the start, and the long and creepy intro to the song immediately sounds different. There's an additional, and loud, brassy sounding synth playing along with the rest. It very much stands out. Till's vocals go on as expected. The style of mixing is distinctly different from the final mix. Interesting effects, and much less bass than the rough mixes before it. The 2 drum hits that mark the end of the intro sound much more aggressive and percussive here. It sounds small, but it's actually a major difference once you get to hear it. On this version, they sound like roaring, cracking thunder or the hearty laugh of an ancient deity. Makes the album version sound weak by comparison. After that is the synth riff that comes before the start of the main guitar riff. In another similarity to Asche, the synth effects, the layering, and the raw wetness of it is so different and so distracting that you almost don't notice that it is overall playing the same notes as always. The main riff then begins as normal, with Nothing to note except the aforementioned new intricacies of the mixing itself. Starting from the latter half of the main riff onward, there's the same high-pitched long synth melody playing alongside it as you would find in the album mix, but it also stands out as sounding extremely different, and it makes your ears perk up immediately. Getting back to the first verse, the backing choir is there as always, but it doesn't quite sound the same. And on top of this, a variant of the synth section from after the intro but before the main riff is also playing throughout the verses. This verse synth is absent from the final version, and it really makes all the difference here. And maybe it's just me, but each time those two iconic drum hits repeat throughout the song, it seems like their intensity gets to be less and less. From this point on to the guitar solo, I don't have much to add aside from emphatically repeating everything I have just said, and once again stressing how much the new verse synth stands out, and how different the synths sound in general. These three alternative mixes on the tape all sound pretty ethereal, I guess is the best way to put it. It would be impossible to mistake these for the final mixes. They are very distinct. The next thing I want to mention about the guitar solo is it doesn't just end when the chorus begins. Richard keeps playing, jamming and bending and screeching notes up until halfway through the final chorus. On the album version, all you hear is a final note from the solo ring out into the chorus for a few brief seconds. This added instrumentation actually sounds like the brief guitar riff that plays when you load up an original copy of Halo 2. The latter half of it, I mean. Right before the normal end of the chorus, the song just very abruptly bleeds into the "So nehm ich was noch übrig ist" part. It doesn't exactly sound like a straight up jump cut, but it is very, very strange. I actually don't know what the explanation here is. It could be another production error, possibly like Fleisch. You don't even actually hear "So nehm ich." It just goes chorus, chorus, nehm ich was noch übrig ist. Aside from this, the remainder of the song plays out without incident. Though it's worth adding that the very end fades out somewhat earlier than the album version. Das alte Lied is up next, and though I have less to say, there is still a lot going on here. The first thing I want to get through is, even though the tape's tracklist calls it by its demo title, Hallo Hallo, the opening Hallo Hallo from Till has been removed. I feel cheated and lied to. The promo version of Hallo Hallo displays the same level of betrayal. Thankfully, they wisened up and decided to keep it for the album later on. I'm actually surprised Helena let that slide. Starting then with the drum intro, the snare drum has quite a different clangy sound to it, and almost sounds like there's an open elevator ding sound added to it. This is another similarity it shares with the Du riechst so gut promo single version, if you'd like to go listen to it for yourself. Then, from the main riff through to the second verse and up to Ich will ficken, the differences are mainly the dinging and intricacies of the mixing, effects, and post-processing. Don't get me wrong, there's lots to talk about there, but I'm very eager to get to the next major difference. Ich will ficken no longer has the echo increasing in pitch, and the nie mehr vocals start in extremely loudly, while Till is still saying ficken. Basically, Till tramples himself to death with this absolutely monstrous, reverberating wall of noise. I feel like I'm gonna say this 1,000 times, but the promo version of the song will give you a great idea of what I mean, though it is not exactly the same. The vocal effects throughout the chorus are also strikingly different. Nie mehr sounds way glossier, and Das alte Lied has some very significant echo added that the album version doesn't have, and above and beyond what the promo version offers. It sounds so clearly like Till is saying, "Das alte Lied, alte Lied." This section is so different from what made it onto the album. The song uses the promo version's alternative synth solo, which has a differently played opening, some changes to the midsection, and the way it plays out is also not exactly the same as the album mix. The backing synth melody in the next verse sounds a little thicker and is turned up in the mix. Circling back to the chorus, we have the same primordial soup of echoing, reverb, and extra layers and effects throughout the chorus that we had earlier, just repeating over and over again. This version of the chorus is a trip to me. At some point, though, Till suddenly gets quiet, and when the extra melodic guitars start ramping up, the crying baby from the other versions, it's still there, but barely, as it is also very quiet. As the chorus finally calms down, the song ends just like the final mix. Just like the album, the song Rammstein closes out this tape. I am a really big fan of this mix of the song. I stand by what I said about these last three mixes being more ethereal, and it really stands out here. The iconic synth opening here sounds much brighter, and again, we get a good look at the dripping wet synth tone all the songs seem to have up to this point. The guitars here generally sound a lot quieter as well. The next thing I noticed is that there is significantly more vocal layering when Till says Rammstein. On the album mix, it pretty much just sounds to me like Till's main take only. But this mix is just oozing with so much atmosphere and character. It just has a sound to me that I think the album version just doesn't beat. But overall, there are less small detail changes to talk about than for the rest of the tape. I have just about two things left to add. 1. After the second verse, there is a change during the part when the main riff plays alone without the drums. On the album version, this section starts at 2:32. The album version has some atmospheric and high-pitched synths playing, but the 9-track mix lacks even these. The 9-track instead has these absolutely wicked-sounding drum hits, almost like Heirate mich, but more twangy, kind of like the sound of smashing a cinder block on the ground. The second thing is about the ending. The album version ends with a final Rammstein from Till, and the drums and guitars wrap up shortly after that, and then that's it. On this version, however, all instrumentation except for the backing synths stops, with the melodic guitar still ringing out. Then Till gives his final multi-layered Rammstein, and the synths play out the final moments of the song. So, in a colossal nutshell, that's the 9-track tape for you. There is so much new here. I'm a little overwhelmed. I tried my best to be as stupidly detailed as possible, but I still feel the need to make a second pass. The amount I've spoken already is already the equivalent of 10 pages of text, so I'll just settle for answering some of the questions some of you in the community had asked us, which will give me a nice opportunity to circle back to some of the points that I want to readdress, as well as some other details I couldn't fit in earlier. Where the hell was I? Questions, right. Damn, I'm tired. I've been hammering away at this for a week straight. First, some questions that came in through Instagram. Is Olli singing Zeeman? Yes, he in fact is. And he sounds so much like Till that it would be impossible to tell them apart if Olli didn't end every verse by angrily eating watermelon into the microphone. No, of course it isn't Olli singing. How could it be? Does Fleisch have the DJ Flaka parts? Man, I wish. But the fucked up pitch it does have makes the existing Fleisch samples sound pretty goddamn freaky. Now, from our buddies on Discord. First, a series of questions from a user going by the name Wahrheit. Thank you, dude. How close to the release of Herzeleid was this sent out? I'm not completely clear on that. From the surrounding context of past statements, I'd personally put it at somewhere between 3 and 6 months in advance. Referring to Leichtzeit. At the 1994 concerts, there's a short instrumental after the second verse before the chorus starts. Is this the case here? No, unfortunately. Till begins singing immediately after that verse. And Wahrheit also asked the question that everyone's been asking: is this Hellner's almost finished version of Feuerrede? So, I'm sure you're all aware of Hellner's recent interview comments. He mentioned having an almost finished version of Feuerrede lying around somewhere. To most, the idea that Feuerrede was recorded during the Herzeleid sessions was a revelation. But is this it from the 9-track tape? Well, yes and no. More accurately, I say that this is an earlier version of what Hellner is talking about. There is probably an even more final mix that exists. I'd assume it to be in the same vein as the last 3 mixes on this tape. That is probably the exact thing Hellner had in mind when he made those comments. The GEMA database lists a version of Feuerrede with a length of 420. This is shorter than the demo version and shorter than the rough mix. If I were in the business of placing bets, I'd bet that this is a more complete mix. But yes, kurz gesagt, if you're looking for a short, straight answer, Hellner confirmed the existence of a Herzeleid version of Feuerrede, and such is what we have on this tape. From the Emperor. Why do you think they used an older demo of Feuerrede rather than this one for Engel Fan Edition? When I first heard of the 9-track tape, I wondered the same thing. The tape says 6 rough mixes and 3 mixes, but the demo version would never qualify as either a rough mix or a proper mix. So that told me we were likely looking at a new version. But if there was a more developed version, why bother releasing the demo? Now, having heard the new version, I do understand where the band was coming from. The newly added vocal lines just don't feel like they fit. The lyrics, I mean, not the takes themselves. And then there's that weird underdeveloped section with the missing keyboard solo. So I guess what I'm saying is, they couldn't quite get the Herzeleid studio version right, and were probably a little unhappy with it. I think it's great, but I have to admit that the demo version does sound far more consistent. Whereas in this rough mix, you have these spectacular moments that are then followed by sections that don't quite continue with the same quality. Now, I'm not quite sure how to account for the probable third and even more finished version of the song that I was just talking about, but I would suspect that the reasons are similar. There could also have been a degree of fan appeal that the band saw in putting out a demo version, and perhaps some nostalgia. I mean, it was called Fan Edition, after all. If only they continued with that mindset. Also from the Emperor, how many more tapes do you guys think are out there? Me, personally, I think there's a couple. I'd bet that there are some more DAT versions of tapes to be found, though these don't have much new to offer. And aside from the 4-track demo, which has yet to be tracked down, I believe there is at least one other completely new and unknown tape out there, but I base this on my own gut feeling only. And I can only account for tapes that were actually sent out for promotion. If you want to include personal tapes created by the band members and given to friends, such as the first 6-track tape, it is impossible to know. Alright, I think it's about time I let you go, don't you? If you sat through this entire thing, then you must be as irredeemably obsessed as I am. I apologize if this style of video comes off in any way as some sort of a tease. After I did the Tacheles videos in the same format, I didn't plan on, nor did I even want, to do another video like that. One where I tell you about the audio I listen to that I can't share with you. But This tape's discovery came at me out of nowhere, and it was way too perfect of an opportunity to pass up doing a video on it. I can't release the audio, obviously, but the very least I can do is describe it. I figured it was better than saying nothing, and better than just brief text on the wiki. God knows, I'd have killed for a video like this on the Schlettwein concert, back before that was unearthed. Now there's a story I should tell. Fuck. Thank you very much for your eyes and ears. For future Unbelievable Insanity, do keep an eye on my uploads, and I hope to welcome you back in the future, if we still have one.